everybody, welcome back to my channel. So today is the very long awaited video where I am going to be talking about supplements. In particular, I'm going to be focusing on 4 types of supplements that are used for enhancing athletic performance. So it's going to be creatine, protein, pre-workout supplements, and BCAAs. So if you're wanting any other supplements, I can definitely cover those in a future video, but for this one we're just going to be focusing on those 4 because I feel like those are the primary ones that someone that is looking into starting to take supplements is most concerned with. And so I figured dive into all of that. Real quick, a disclaimer though before we get started. I am not a doctor. I am also not a dietitian or a nutritionist. My expertise comes from a master's degree that I have in sports and health sciences, and particularly with supplementation, my entire thesis revolved around supplementation use for increasing athletic performance versus a whole foods diet. And there were lots of really interesting things that I found out while I was doing the research for that thesis. So in addition to covering those 4 supplements, we'll also just do a real quick summary of why people should be using supplements in the first place or why not, and some of the dangers to keep in mind if you are going to start taking supplements, just so that you understand the risks inherent with supplements. So without further ado, I'm just gonna go ahead and jump into my makeup. Hopefully I can stay on track because so many things to discuss. But yeah, I'm super duper pumped for this video, so I hope you guys are equally as pumped. The first thing that I really briefly want to touch on is that the reason why people should be taking supplements in the first place is because they are deficient in something. That's literally the whole purpose of supplements. It's not to overdose yourself on a particular nutrient. It is because you are wanting to supplement something that you are not getting from your diet. So it's things like food allergies that might cause you to not be able to ingest a particular nutrient. So for instance, those individuals that are like lactose intolerant might need to take a calcium supplement, but that is kind of the purpose behind supplements, is that they are meant to supplement things that your body is either not producing enough of itself or that you are not getting from your diet. For athletic purposes though, there are particular types of supplements that there are extensive studies on that can potentially help to improve your athletic performance. There are different ways in which the supplements do that, whether it be providing additional energy during your workout, additional focus, assisting with increased recovery speed between workouts, reducing delayed onset muscle soreness, any of that kind of thing. There are a lot of studies that have been conducted to attempt to show whether these things can provide you with some kind of assistance. The interesting thing, however, about the research that has been done on supplements is that first off, it is not something where studies have been conducted for hundreds and hundreds of years, obviously. It is something that is more of a recent type thing that has been looked at. And so some of the potentially long-term effects of supplements have not been researched as extensively. Because of that, the amount of information available on the long-term effects that you might have from taking particular supplements is not super duper available. The same can be said as well for particular groups of individuals, that there is less research that has been done on the impact that supplements have on those particular groups. And so some examples of that would be the female population or younger individuals. Most studies are primarily focused around males that are at least 18 years of age, and especially within the strength training side of things rather than just for cardio and things like that. There are minimal studies available that focus on how supplements can affect athletic performance for women specifically. But one of the interesting things that I actually found when I was doing the research for my thesis was that the majority of women, we could probably, for the most part, unless you are like at the upper elite, so like the less than 1% that is like at the Olympic level, you could and even there, you could probably as a woman get away with just a whole foods diet and just alter your macros and how you're ingesting that and the timing of it, and you would still be equally as effective as if you were taking supplements. With men, it is a little bit different just because men have a tendency to burn through things a little bit faster, and so that's primarily where I would recommend taking supplements. Wow, my dogs are just click-clacking this entire time. But with the timing of when you ingest supplements, I think that is where, for guys in particular, it can really be beneficial if you are doing like multiple workouts a day. One of the other things to also kind of discuss a little bit are the potential dangers that come with taking supplements. So what I mean by that is not even so much getting into like the effects that it might have on an individual person and how effective they might be, because that should be something that's fairly obvious, is that each person is going to react to things that they are taking into their body differently. But in addition to that, part of the issue and the danger that arises with supplements is the lack of regulation on supplements. And what I mean by that is, so with things like foods and with actual drugs that are prescribed and many that are over the counter, you have the Food and Drug Administration does very intensive regulation of those products to ensure their safety. And if there are side effects, they are very heavily labeled as such. That's why you get like these strips of writing that are literally like a mile long that list all of the potential side effects and dosage and everything else and how you should be careful with it. And that's why you don't see that with supplements, is because there is not as much regulation going on. And there's, again, also a lot less research being done on the effects of different supplements. Now, a caveat to that is that there is a plethora of studies that have been conducted on specific individual ingredients. So the use of arginine, the use of creatine, or caffeine specifically. So like specific singular nutrients, there is a ton of research out there on potential benefits or lack thereof. The thing that is severely lacking in studies that have been conducted and FDA regulation are any of these supplements that are multi-ingredient supplements. Like your pre-workout supplements, those are all multi-ingredient, where they don't have just caffeine. They have a whole bunch of other things. And so those are your stimulant pre-workouts. Your non-stimulant pre-workouts are going to have things like nitric oxide or whatever else. And so there's many ingredients that go into those types of products, and that is where the lack of regulation comes in and the lack of studies that have been conducted on the efficacy of those products. Some companies do get internal studies that they conduct to see how effective the products are. I kind of view those studies as, first off, being incredibly biased, but also more of a marketing tool that is used by companies to attempt to persuade people to use their product over others, because then they can say, look at all these studies that were conducted on this particular product specifically that prove how effective or ineffective it is. So to also get into, in addition to the marketing that companies will use, one of the other things that also makes the regulation of supplements very tricky is if you look at the ingredients list for any particular supplement, you'll notice in many, many cases that there is something listed under the ingredients as like a proprietary blend, or any other labeling that is similar to that. And that particular type of labeling is very suspicious, because essentially what that is saying is companies are able to use that blend to where they don't have to factually list out the ingredients that they are using within the supplements. And so essentially the reason for that is that those proprietary blends are protected under copyright so that other companies cannot steal the same makeup of ingredients and amounts and recreate the product, essentially. Companies are able to pretty much just list out generic things within that proprietary blend of like whatever ingredients they feel like throwing in there. They don't have to accurately tell you all of the ingredients. So that blend might not even be listing all of the ingredients that are included in the blend. And in addition to that, they don't have to list out the amounts. So the percentages of each of those ingredients that are included within that product. And so that makes it very, very dangerous, because you don't really know what you're putting into your body. And so that that is something where you have to kind of accept that if you're going to be taking supplements, there is a decent amount of risk involved. The other thing as well that you have to also keep in mind is that a lot of these supplements are mass produced in warehouses where you also might have illegal substances being mass produced, because things like steroids and human growth hormones and whatever else, a lot of those types of things, and testosterone, those are ingredients that are included in other products that are mass produced in these same types of warehouses. And so the potential risk of contamination of an illegal substance in your supplements that you are taking is there. And that is a risk that professional athletes have to also bear in mind. A perfect example of that would be in the last couple years in the CrossFit community, there has been a very large rash of people testing positive for illegal substances, and some of those individuals were able to track back that it wasn't that they were ingesting the things on purpose, it was that they were just cross-contamination into the supplements that those people were taking, which is a very unfortunate thing. But the reality is that as an athlete, and especially as a professional athlete, you are 100% responsible for what you eat and what you ingest. You have to be willing to accept that risk, and if you are not willing to accept that risk, then don't take supplements. And especially for like military populations, you need to be extra careful, because then it's not just your athletic career that you might be sacrificing, it's also your military career as well, because there is a no tolerance policy within the military as well, and it doesn't matter if you didn't mean to take those supplements or not, you're still going to get removed from the service. Before we move on, I did just real quick want to address something that I left out of the video. So on some products, you will see labels that say things like informed sport or informed choice or whatever else, and this means that that particular company does some form of third-party inspections of their products to potentially ensure that there aren't any illegal substances within those products. That kind of testing, however, is usually batch testing, so they're only going to test like 1 or 2 containers out of an entire batch, so it's still not 100% guaranteed that you wouldn't get an illegal substance in your batch, but it does somewhat reduce the potential. Alright, so moving on from the negative side of these things, we can start to get into the different ways in which you can take supplements. There's things, I mean, the most obvious ones are going to be your powders, capsule, pill. There's also chewables, I found out recently, for creatine specifically. And by chewable, I mean like, I guess you can chew them, but they were really chalky. And it said that it was grape flavored on there, but I gotta be honest, if that was grape flavored, it like was so beyond watered down. It was like chalk with like a poof of grape flavor, and that was all you were getting. I was not a huge fan of that. There's also just beverages. We've all seen the things like the Rain products and Monsters and 5-Hour Energies, and those are all technically things that you could utilize as a pre-workout drink. The whole purpose behind a pre-workout drink is to ingest caffeine, and the reason for that is that there have been studies that show that caffeine can obviously not only increase your energy, but also enhance your focus, which can be very beneficial during a workout, especially if you are doing weightlifting where you really need to kind of focus in on what you're doing. Caffeine can help with that, and so that is why the majority of your pre-workout supplements have caffeine in them, and usually the caffeine range is between 150 to 350 milligrams, which is like the difference between 1 to 4 cups of coffee, I guess, if they were like 8-ounce cups of coffee. And so it's a decent amount of caffeine that you can ingest, and that is the type of pre-workout that is known as a stimulant pre-workout. There are also pre-workouts that are non-stimulant pre-workouts. Those can range from things like your pump pre-workout, ones that have like an increase in nitric oxide, which essentially is where it increases the blood flow to your muscles. That is where you'll see like on people that are lifting weights, where they get like super vascular, where you can see like all of their veins coming into their arms, and that is partially caused by supplements that increase that blood flow to the muscles, and so it expands the muscles out to get more oxygen flow to the muscles, so that it increases the endurance of those muscles during weightlifting. Also, these supplements that I am talking about are primarily, I would say 3/4 of them, I would recommend more for weightlifting rather than cardio-based workouts. I would typically not recommend like a pre-workout for a cardio workout. That's like asking for a heart attack, like at least in my opinion. I'm not a huge fan. One of the supplements that I would recommend for people that are doing more cardio based would be a protein supplement, and specifically a protein supplement that also includes carbohydrates in it. There are some of those mixed post-workout type powders that you can get where it's not just the whey protein that's in there, they also have a carbohydrate base as well. That is something that is not only super duper great for people that are looking to bulk up, but it's also really great for people that do endurance cardio to help refuel your body. That's a really good option for that specifically, as well as for people that are looking to really try and bulk up in their weight. Because I think that protein on its own, especially for guys, they can burn through it fairly quickly. And in addition to that, your body can only process so much of a particular nutrient at a time. If you decide that you're going to ingest like hundreds of grams of protein, your body can't process all of it. So you're just going to end up shitting the rest of it out. And so instead of that, it's far more effective to use one of those protein carbohydrate blends, because your body processes the carbohydrates differently than it does with the proteins, because carbohydrates are meant to be that longer time frame for digestion and for, you know, extracting the nutrients out, and so your body will utilize that far better. Okay, so to get a little bit more into what the supplements are used for, we've kind of briefly touched a little bit on pre-workout and protein and things like that, but we'll get a little bit more into each of them specifically, and like when it's most recommended to take them, how much you should take, all of that kind of stuff. So the first one that we'll talk about will be creatine, just because that's the easiest of all of them. If you are wanting to take a creatine supplement, I highly recommend that it be a creatine monohydrate rather than a creatine blend, because again, we're wanting to reduce the amount of ingredients that are in the supplements that we're taking, and usually the recommended amount is about 5 milligrams. Creatine in particular is a supplement that a lot of people primarily use. I think the misconception is that creatine is the same as protein in that it is primarily used for increasing lean muscle mass. That is only accurate to an extent. I would recommend it if you are a weightlifter versus someone that is primarily focusing on cardio, just because the studies that have been done tend to lean more towards the effectiveness of creatine with short burst exercises, and so that would be for like weightlifting in particular, or sprint type workouts where it's that explosiveness of the muscles that you're trying to work on, and that is something where there is some amount of research that would lend itself towards creatine helping with that. It can also potentially help with increasing the speed with which you recover between workouts. That is a positive for those people that are doing multiple workouts a day, where you might want to have that as a thing. But if you're only doing one workout a day, your body is naturally going to recover in between those workouts, in which case you might not need to really worry about taking any creatine. So it's one of those things where you do kind of need to know what your goals are and how frequently you're wanting to work out, because that's going to change the type of supplements that you would potentially want to take. Usually they recommend for creatine that if you're going to take it, that you want to take it either at the end of your workout combined with your protein source, or in the middle of your workout. Okay, moving on from creatine, we'll move on to pre-workout next, and then we'll jump into protein and BCAAs, because those are kind of related to each other, and so I want to cover the two of those together. So for pre-workout, there's a kind of, like I mentioned earlier, stimulant and non-stimulant pre-workouts. And so your stimulant pre-workouts are going to have caffeine in them, and your non-stimulant ones are going to have most likely more of your pump type ingredients like nitric oxide and things like that. One of the things that some people have commented on that they either like or don't like is that tingly feeling that you sometimes get with certain pre-workouts. And the specific ingredient that you're going to be looking for with that is going to be beta-alanine. And so if you happen to notice that a pre-workout has beta-alanine specifically in it, most likely you will experience some form of tingling. And then obviously depending on how much beta-alanine they put into their products and how much of a dose you take, the amount of tingliness and that numbing kind of in your lips and everything that people will feel can potentially change. And so that is something to kind of keep in mind. If you are someone that does not like that feeling, then look for that specific ingredient and then avoid those particular pre-workouts. So for caffeine in particular, there is a decent amount of research out there that supports the concept that it can be somewhat beneficial to you during a workout to have caffeine as a source of energy and increased mental focus. I would say that of the different types of supplements, that caffeine is probably one of the most researched. And I would also say that of the studies that do exist for particular companies, pre-workout is probably the one that has the most studies done to attempt to show its efficacy. The negative side of that is that all of your pre-workout supplements are multi-nutrient and multi-ingredient supplements. And so unless you are taking just strictly caffeine pills, you are going to be taking something that has multiple ingredients in it. Part of the danger with that is that, as with any mixture of chemicals, because supplements are created chemically for the most part, at least these types are, and so the thing to keep in mind with that is that just like with any science project that is out there, if you mix chemicals in a certain way, it's going to cause a particular type of reaction. And if you mix them in a different way, it's going to cause a different type of reaction. And so that is one of those things where these studies that do exist for this kind of thing have definitely shown mixed results on how effective certain products are. With a lot of these pre-workout blends that you get, depending on how they combine arginine and caffeine and nitric oxide and whatever else that they feel like throwing in there, you will have different levels of results with that. I would say if you are going to be taking a pre-workout, I would recommend it primarily if you are wanting to be doing strength training. I would not recommend, especially a stimulant pre-workout, I would not recommend that for cardio. So the next two supplement types are going to be protein and BCAAs. And the reason why I lump them in together is that we can go a little bit back into some of the basics of nutrition for a second, in that proteins are essentially made up of amino acids, and of which there are 9 essential amino acids. And what that means is that your body does not naturally produce those amino acids and that you have to get them from a food source. And so there are your complete proteins that you can get from whatever whole foods meat option. Those will contain complete proteins. You can also have other types of foods, like there are definitely a plethora of vegetables out there that contain a certain number of amino acids. They are not complete proteins, obviously, because they are not meat, but they are incomplete proteins in that they provide some of the essential amino acids that your body needs to function, but because again they are not complete proteins, that's part of why protein exists as a supplement, is to help you regain those amino acids that you might not be getting. But along with that, it's definitely very much something that is a balance of things and that you do want to be careful. My thought process is that BCAAs, which stands for branched chain amino acids, function very similar to a protein supplement, and if you are ingesting complete proteins like meat, then you probably don't need BCAAs. That being said, there is some research out there that would ascertain that BCAAs can be used in addition to being a moderate energy source. They can also potentially help with reducing delayed muscle soreness. The amount of research that's out there on that is moderate at best, and I am someone that I think your body's gonna heal and recover at a certain rate, and regardless of whether you take supplements or not, your body will heal at that rate. That's kind of my opinion. Again, not a doctor, but that's my thought on it. I think that things that actually help with reducing soreness are things like yoga and stretching and increasing your flexibility and increasing your movement in between workouts. From my experience with doing things like extreme endurance type competitions, if after a race I am very sore, I will do my utmost to move around a decent amount after the race and also also do a decent amount of stretching. And then in the days thereafter, I will always make sure that I at least do some kind of working out to warm the muscles back up, increase their pliability, which for me helps to reduce the amount of soreness, not in the moment, but it reduces the length of time with which I am sore. I do not agree with the mindset that supplements will help reduce soreness. The only thing that I would typically tend to get behind is if you are taking some kind of thing to help with inflammation. But as far as like actually getting rid of the pain and making the healing process go by faster, I don't particularly agree with that. And obviously many people will disagree with me. There are also many people out there that will agree. I would never want to dissuade someone from trying something, but this is just my attempt at sharing the research that I have done. Moving on to the final supplement, which is protein. And protein is definitely by far the most researched of the supplements, that protein assists with the growth of lean muscle mass and that it aids as an energy source during workouts. And so protein is something that I would recommend as a supplement regardless of what type of sport type you are doing, whether it be weightlifting, cardio, whatever else. Protein has many benefits for all types of sports. I will never say no to protein just because, again, there is so much research to support the benefits that protein can provide. However, the one thing to keep in mind with that is making sure that you are ingesting the proper amount. So kind of like what I had mentioned before about your body only being able to process so much of a particular nutrient at a given time. And so based on your height, weight, all of that kind of stuff, you would want to calculate how much of that particular macro you need. And that is where going to see someone like a nutritionist or a dietitian can really help, because they would easily be able to help assist you with breaking down how much you actually need based on your body type and then also what your particular goals are. Again, depending on the types of protein sources that you are using, the need for supplements is not there. So that kind of falls into where the timing of things and how much exercise you do in a day kind of matters. If you are only working out once a day and you're wanting to bulk up a little bit, then you can probably easily accomplish that just with a whole foods diet. And so for someone like me, I use protein supplements primarily because number one, I'm wanting to bulk back up. I miss my muscles. I don't know, I've got like a little bit of muscle coming back, but like I was fairly jacked before the Rona hit. I want to get that back, and so I am increasing my protein intake because of that. But I also primarily use protein because I do multiple workouts a day. With the nature of my schedule with my job as well as the scheduling of my workouts, I do not always have time to get a meal. And so I will use a post-workout protein blend with a carbohydrate after my workout if I can't immediately go get food. And because you do typically want to eat, I would say within 30 to 40 minutes of your workout. If that's unrealistic for your schedule, then having something like a protein shake or a protein bar or whatever it ends up being can be beneficial in at least giving your body somewhat of a nutrient balance again. I'm super undecided on whether I like this or not. Hopefully this video was really interesting for you guys. I loved making it. I literally love talking about supplements as well as just sports and athletics in general, and definitely weightlifting. If you guys have any additional questions or a particular topic that you want me to cover, go ahead and leave it in the comments down below. Give me a thumbs up if you like this. If you're new to my channel and you enjoy my content, feel free to give me a subscribe. I would love that. But other than that, I hope you guys liked this and it was informative, and just go have a good one.